Talking with the experts.
James Warriner explains how organisational success depends on the effective and efficient sending and receiving of messages in episode 326.
The next step, though, is usually where the people stumble. So a lot of people say the audience is the most important factor in your presentation or any kind of communication, which is true. The challenge comes into play where what do you do once you know who they are? Right? So, okay, now I know who my audience is, or I know who I'm speaking to. How does that help me? How does that inform what I say and how I say it? And that's really where folks kind of, like I said, dare I say, a lot of people are ill-equipped. They're not really sure. They say, okay, I'm just going to go in there with me and do what I've always done and hope for the best. With certain people, it'll land because certain people they'll resonate with you naturally. You know, they'll understand the way you think, they'll understand the way you talk. But there's all different types of people in the world. And and that's a lot of what I do with my training and coaching is the more communication styles you master, it's like a carpenter being able to use different tools.
Welcome to Talking with the Experts. This is where we discuss great ideas to take your business to the next level. How do we know these ideas work? Well, it's because we're talking with business owners who are using these ideas. Business owners who have years of experience and expertise. All things business by business owners for business owners. And now, here is your host, Rose Davidson.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. I'm your host, Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com. Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners. You can catch it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. Today my guest is Ryan Warriner, and Ryan is going to be discussing with us optimizing communication and maximizing results. And Ryan is a professor of communication, an executive trainer and coach, as well as a published author of The Effective Presenter. With over a decade of professional communication experience and expertise, he has mastered the science of optimum communication, strategic directional planning, and powerfully effective presentations. Welcome, Ryan, and thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Rose. It's my pleasure. And that was a fantastic introduction. I couldn't have written it better myself.
Really? Oh, my goodness. Ryan, tell me how you got into communication. A professor of communication. That's quite a feat. How did you get into it?
Yeah, sure. I got asked that question recently, and I kind of went a little bit deep on it back to my childhood. So I'll try to keep it a little bit more recent now with this version. But basically, what happened was I always wanted to be a teacher, and I got into education. I got into the psychology of how people learn, how people make decisions and live their lives, basically navigate through their lives. And at some point in that process, I realized how powerful, how important communication is, both what people receive and what they deliver, and how impactful that can be. And I found it was not only was it extremely influential, but also it was often overlooked. A lot of people didn't really pay much attention to it, or it was, dare I say, taken for granted. And because of that, I decided, I'm going to be the one to shine a spotlight on this as much as I can.
Yeah, communication is, it comes in all sorts of forms, and there's written communication and verbal and non-verbal and you name it. So, what are you specializing in? Which type of communication?
Yeah, that's another great question. So initially, because it is so broad, and so many people have different experiences and different requirements with communication, I can tell you when I started, I really focused on pitching and business types of communication, marketing plans. And there's a lot of professionals who are exceptional at hard skills in their jobs. Someone in finance, for example, is just brilliant with numbers and financial forecasting and et cetera. But when it comes time to communicate what they've uncovered or what they project to others, they really struggle. And I just found that that's an area where I was able to add a lot of value very quickly by giving folks some tools and some strategies that they could implement. On a deeper level, Many folks suffer from speaking anxiety and speaking nervousness, and for some, it's so uh, say it impacts them so much that they actually avoid opportunities and they miss out because they don't put themselves in situations where they could shine or they could be recognized for their value. But instead they shy away, and then unfortunately someone else gets that opportunity to for promotion or to represent the company at an event or something like this. So I think that's kind of how I started with more of the public speaking and the delivery and the presentation design. And nowadays I do a lot more conflict resolution training and coaching. I do a lot of individual executive coaching for leaders who have to, they've ascended to a leadership position. And now they're no longer the star performer. Now they have to manage a team. So it's a different skill set that's required, different language that's more effective. And yeah, sorry, I know I went on a tangent there. I hope I answered your question.
You absolutely did. Yes, thank you. Yeah, because being a leader, being a manager, being a CEO, being a high level executive, you've got to have really good communication skills. And you're right, some people are terrified of public speaking, and sometimes just getting up in front of your team to speak, brings along a lot of anxiety, and so those are skills that really need to be learned, and you need to be confident in them.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of folks, unfortunately, they fall into this trap. This is one of the trends that people ask me, like, what do you see a lot of? I say, you know what I see a lot of? I see a lot of, especially high level executives, they tend to play out what they anticipate will happen in their mind in advance. And more often than not, it's not successful. And it's great for them in strategic direction in business or in their profession. They can kind of predict what's going to happen. They position themselves more accordingly, and they realize more success. But with people are a little bit different, and they try to apply that same methodology with people. And where they say, if I say this to my team, I'm going to get this back, and then this is what it's going to lead to, and then it's going to, and we actually have to kind of peel back the layers to get to, like, is it really, well, what if you don't get that? What if you get, like, no problem, let's do it? Or what if someone responds with, I just have one question, but otherwise, yeah, we're good. And then it's a different story, right? So sometimes it's just a matter of a leap of faith, so to speak.
Yeah, I was always taught, when giving a talk, to imagine the outcome, and I used to do that before I went to speak, and then the outcome was not how I imagined it, and I was really deflated, and I thought, it was supposed to turn out all good, and it didn't. So I gave up public speaking. I mean, I can do the podcast, and I can be interviewed by other people. Get me on a Facebook Live, no way. Or get me up to talk in front of a group of people, no way. I just freeze. I just get, speaking anxiety. It's terrible.
Yeah, you're not alone. I think the research said 82 point something percent of people have some degree of speaking anxiety. But with what you said, yeah, that's a very common, it's a misconception. It's unfortunate. I do what I can to kind of reverse that. But a lot of people say, oh, envision the perfect outcome, envision the perfect outcome. And in the Olympics, they tell the skiers who go downhill, I'm Canadian, so we have winter sports, I know it. But we have
So do
the
we.
skiers.
We've won gold medals in Olympic sports, so don't you worry.
Oh, there you go. See, we have more in common than we thought. But yeah, they tell the skiers, don't envision the perfect run, because then if you make a mistake, it's going to be much more difficult for you to recover, because then you're going to be beating yourself up mentally as you're trying to perform. It's cognitive overload.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, so that same applies when you're speaking. If you make one mistake, then it's tough for you to deliver the rest effectively when you're thinking about, oh, I should have used this word instead, or oh, what are they thinking now?
Absolutely. And communicating is really all about the receiver, isn't it? I mean, you're not supposed to be selfish and make the communication all about yourself. You're supposed to make the communication about the person who you're giving the communication to, especially if you're giving a pitch or you are trying to sell something. I've been always taught that it's always about the client or the customer. Is that the way you see things?
Yeah, it is. But so it absolutely is. But the next step though is usually where the people stumble. So a lot of people say the audience is the most important factor in your presentation or any kind of communication, which is true. The challenge comes into play where what do you do once you know who they are? right? So, okay, now I know who my audience is, or I know who I'm speaking to. How does that help me? How does that inform what I say and how I say it? And that's really where folks kind of, like I said, dare I say, a lot of people are ill-equipped. They're not really sure. They say, okay, I'm just going to go in there with me and do what I've always done and hope for the best. With certain people, it'll land because certain people they'll resonate with you naturally. You know, they'll understand the way you think, they'll understand the way you talk. But there's all different types of people in the world. And and that's a lot of what I do with my training and coaching is the more communication styles you master, it's like a carpenter being able to use different tools, right? Then you can use a different one depending on the situation you're in. Then it's just a matter of diagnosing, okay, this person will resonate more with X than Y. I'm going to choose X and I'm going to, take on this persona and deliver this way.
Yeah. So what makes a good communicator? What skills should someone have to communicate effectively and really well?
The two skills that are most important, one is being able to assess and diagnose in real time the person you're speaking with or the group of folks that you're speaking to. Whoever you're communicating with, it's good to do as much background information as possible, but even the event that it's spontaneous and you don't have much time, you really want to improve your skills to the point where you can read them and you understand if they're following you, if they're not following you, at what points they're focusing on what's valuable to them. If you can do that in real time, that's a real asset. That's something it's very important in communication. Then the second part is being self-aware and self-reflective. It's much harder. It sounds easy, but a lot of people have this bias towards themselves. Like, well, I said it fine. If they didn't understand, they weren't listening, or they were just distracted, something like this. But okay, maybe you did say it okay, but was it optimal? That's the question. So
Yeah, that's a good point because how often we think we're communicating on an effective level, we're not. People have misunderstood the message, or we haven't communicated in a way that the audience or the receiver can understand it. And especially when they start using jargon or acronyms or things like that. I dislike that when someone's giving a talk. It doesn't matter whether they're, a company that understands them. Sometimes, they get, it loses the message when you start using jargon and things like that. That's what I believe anyway.
no, I agree with you as well. And it doesn't take much to clarify what that jargon means. It takes 2 seconds to say, oh yeah, by the way, JPC means this, right? And then you're good to go. But you're right, it's another element that's just commonly overlooked. And I see
Yeah.
people, I was talking with a group of lawyers the other day. I was at a law firm doing some training with their associates. A lot of the associates, as you can imagine, when they're young and some of them is their first job, they have to speak to judges and they have to speak to people in authority. They get a little bit of speaking anxiety too. And when they were speaking about, they said like, small law versus big law versus, I said, whoa, what is big law? Like I said, you gotta explain what you're saying. You can't just assume whoever's listening will understand exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah, I used to be a court clerk here in one of the capital cities here, in the magistrates court, which is one of the lower courts, and they're called Tippies. Don't ask me why, but that's just an old English term that's just carried on through modern society. But I was always just myself, and you're speaking to a magistrate, and you're supposed to be all straight and don't have jokes and I used to, and I didn't last there very long because I made assumptions that I was allowed to do that, and so I got sacked because I wasn't communicating in the way that was acceptable in that particular environment, and it's quite sad really, but never mind, it happened.
Well, I mean, at the same time, you weren't aware, right? Like, had you been aware, you would have chose a different path or a different style, I'm assuming.
Probably yes, but yeah, I took advantage of my position when he was sitting in the courtroom, and it didn't go down well. Never mind. It's another story for another time.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm gonna hold you to that.
Now, I guess, communication, comes from all levels of society, from, when we're small children, right up to when we, executives in major corporations. So I know you have to hone your skills for, different levels of life, but what are some some things that we could help ourselves with to communicate at all levels of society?
The first thing, and I kind of just bridging off of my last response, the first thing that people can do is practice self-awareness, become more self-reflective. And what I mean by that is to actually get into the weeds and be tangible, be kind of quantitative, is when when an exchange is finished, you've just completed an interaction with someone, wherever, at work or at the store, wherever you are, and you're walking away. Think about, how did that go down? How the events that just unfolded, right? What were they thinking? Why did they respond the way they responded? Did they use gestures? What words did they use? Why did they use that word instead of another word? Was there meaning behind it? If you start to become a little bit more analytical with communication, you'll find that people have natural tendencies. There's a lot of commonalities. And when people say certain phrases or certain words, or they use certain gestures paired with words, it means that they're choosing that for a reason. And when you're able to decipher that, it really becomes a powerful advantage, because I mean, we don't always need to persuade every day, but when it comes time where you would like something to influence an event to happen, or you'd like someone to support you, or in anything at work or one of your friends, etc., you'll be able to understand more accurately where people stand, and then you can respond more favorably.
But and don't you just hate it when you've had a conversation with somebody and then you walk away and you're thinking about the conversation, I should have said that, or I missed saying that, or, isn't that just the pits?
It is. Yeah, it is. To that I say, you have to cut yourself a little bit of slack, because it takes it takes a lot of brain power, a lot of cognitive energy to focus and read. You're doing multiple things at once, right? You're listening to the language, you're watching their body language, you're trying to analyze in real time. It's a little bit like trying to ride a bicycle and juggle at first. It'll be challenging. But you can just practice these on small conversations. It's a skill that you can just harness over time. And what will happen is, like I said, you'll be able to read people more quickly, and it'll give you a better idea of what they're after, what they're angling for, if they have one. And then you'll be able to, like I said, position yourself more favorably.
Yeah, and body language is a big thing when you're communicating with people. It's really hard in the written type of communication to get the message across in the way that it's intended. And sometimes in written communication, messages are misunderstood or misconstrued, and can cause a lot of angst between the parties. But body language is a very important part of visual communication, or verbal communication when you're actually face to face with somebody. What is a good tip for, actually sitting down with somebody and having a conversation and not appearing too aggressive?
Great question. I had so many thoughts when you were speaking. I was in my mind's going, what's the final question going to be here? So because there's so much that goes into body language with regard to being not aggressive. It's the well-known established body language positions, such as, like, showing palms and having open arms, open body language as opposed to closed, showing your face as opposed to hiding it, and being gesturing and smiling when you're delivering language, or even if you have to deliver bad news or something you believe will be received unfavorably, you can still do that in a positive way. You can still say, you can frame whatever you're saying, you can frame it, right? Whatever picture you have, you can always frame it. So I tell my clients that all the time. You can say, listen, this is one part of my job which I don't enjoy, but I have to do this, right? If you're reprimanding someone, for example, right? So I'm telling you this because I don't want it to ruin your day, but I want you to be aware of it so that next time we can improve and we can realize a different result. Do you understand? And people be like, yeah, yeah. And then they're on your side. Then they know you're there to support them. So you're not pointing out their mistakes. You're showing them this is what happened. And then next time if we do this, it'll be better. And that method and that approach, instantly people are more receptive, and it's a more positive exchange afterwards. It's not feelings of resentment, anger, and frustration. It's more feelings of like, okay, support. Yeah, now I can excel even further next time. I'm glad I have a manager or supervisor like this, not someone who's going to be picking at me.
Yeah, I was always taught, and all the communication things that I've learned is that if you're going to start a conversation and you're going to, deliver bad news, always deliver something positive first, and then deliver the bad news, and then finish off with something positive. That way, it's not so hard to accept the bad news.
Yeah, we call that the in education they call it the sandwich technique. I personally I find it works in some situations. It has its place, but in professional communication, I think it's much more appreciated to be direct. So usually, emails are a different story, but if we're talking about an email or something like this, I would say, if you have a request to make of someone, or if you need them to do something, it's a command, whatever, what have you. You start with that, say good morning, or hello, whoever, and you start with that, and then afterwards you say, by the way, you did a great job on this brief, or you did a great job on this project. Hope to work with you again, or hope that this comes to a positive collaboration. And if you leave on a positive note, that's what's most important. Starting on the positives, like, it's okay, but a lot of people brush over that, right? Like, oh, I hope you're doing well, or yeah, I hope you have a great week, or something like that. People just kind of skip through that anyways to get to what do you really want.
Yeah, I always start mine with, hi, whoever, I hope you're well. I mean, I always start like that. I don't know why, and I've been told that I shouldn't be doing it, but I don't know. I just feel like I want to make sure that that they're open enough to receive the message that I have to deliver.
Well, the research, Rose, I can tell you this. I don't know if it'll change your approach going forward, but I can say that the Gallup polls. They are sitting on mountains and mountains of research, and one of the most impactful findings I believe they've ever produced was that when there's any form of communication, people will remember two things. They'll remember the most impactful moment to them, and they'll remember the last thing that's said or the last thing that they read. Those are the two things that they'll think about afterwards. So, with that in mind, whenever I'm crafting my messaging, I make sure to leave it on positive. The last thing I say is always positive, and I try to, keep it brief so that there's not much room for anything else to be impactful but what my message is.
Okay, good plan. It's a food for thought. Food for thought. Now, Ryan, being a professor of communication and a trainer and a coach, have you written a book about this topic at all?
Yes, I have actually. It just came out
Oh,
earlier
you
this
did.
year.
Yes. Oh, you did say the effective presenter, but have you written anything else?
Have I written anything else? Yeah, so I actually write for Oxford University Press as well. I've written a few textbooks for university students and for people learning for people learning and leveling up their language
That's
skills.
where I know your name from. I actually read one of your articles and quoted you in one of mine. So there you go.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. But yeah, I love writing for Oxford. It's a little bit more of an academic tone because it's meant for people specifically looking to level up their language. I wrote The Effective Presenter, just a copy of it right here. I wrote this for any person who's looking to realize better results in their lives. So could someone going into an interview to present yourself better, right? Someone who just wants to communicate better with their family or with their friends. Because really, when you think about it, everything in life is a presentation.
Mm.
Right? We spoke about body language earlier, and it's so different than oral communication because body language, if we're talking about nonverbal communication, you can't turn it off. You're always communicating. So you have to be aware of what you're presenting to people, even when you're not actually presenting to people, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree totally. Zoom is a great tool, and someone asked me a question today. I was being interviewed for a new project, and they said, how can you build that know, like, and trust? I said, well, it's easy when you do it by video, because people can see your expression and they can get your body language. Listening to an audio or a podcast is not so easy, but if you like the sound of someone's voice, then you can build that trust with them. But it's easier with video, I find.
I find too. It's like you said, human psychology. When we see someone, when we're actually the interaction is happening, it's a little bit more live, a little bit more engaging, a little bit more striking.
Absolutely. Ryan, where can they find The Effective Presenter?
So it's available anywhere books are sold. My publisher is actually in the UK. So it's available in USA and Canada and the UK. It's available on Amazon and pretty much everywhere. And not just because I always feel kind of like conflicted when I say this, but I wrote it, the impetus behind it was to help anyone who's a professional realize more success. Because I mentioned earlier, there's just so many people out there that are exceptional at their jobs. They just need a little bit of communication skill, and they could be in a whole different world. They can be in a whole different job, a whole different career. So I wrote it for anyone that can read, anyone, easily readable. It's very reader friendly, and it follows a framework. So it's pretty straightforward. And yeah, pick it up anywhere, and I'd be happy to help as much as I can.
Perfect. I'll have to go and find a copy of it. And find that article that I stole your quote from. I can't even remember what the quote was, but I quoted you 2 or 3 times in my article that I wrote, because I really liked what you had to say. It was amazing. Anyway, that's enough head swelling for now. Ryan, where can people find you if they'd like to work with you or learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website's professionalpresentationservices.com. There's many free resources on there. I made many cheat sheets and resources, documents that complement the book. So if you have a presentation or upcoming communication, you need to design a structure, or you need an introduction example, you can go there and have a look. That's pretty much the main way folks get in touch with me. But I'm also always available on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me, reach out, send me a message. And I'm happy to chat, happy to speak about your situation and see so much value we can add, and if we can get you to the success point you want.
It's wonderful. Any last words of wisdom that you'd like to share?
Yeah, thank you. I would love to share one thing for all the folks out there who are listening or watching this, and they think, well, Ryan, I'm sure that works for everyone else, but you don't understand me, or it's just me. I struggle with it. It's just my problem. I work with people on a daily basis. I work with CEOs, executives that you wouldn't believe that have thought the same thing. And now all of a sudden they're ascending even higher. It's not like your height. It's not like your eye color. It's a skill. It can be improved. You can always improve it. So please don't feel stuck. Okay. It's not just you. You can always level up, excuse me, and achieve better results.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And self-improvement is always better than no improvement.
I agree.
Ryan, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've had so much fun. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
You've been listening to Talking with the Experts, hosted by Rose Davidson. Make sure you have a look at our back catalogue over at talkingwiththeexperts.com. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any episode. We look forward to your company next time. Talking with the Experts.